Well, hello friends, Mark Martella here for Mark's Money Matters, where I help you break your addiction to credit and bring some sanity to your finances. So, as you know, I have a website which has all of my past videos, and we have some great free resources. The most powerful free resource, hey Mike, how you doing? The most powerful free resource is my ultimate budget planning tool to help you really think about all of your true expenses and how to take control of your finances. And I haven't done a live show in a few weeks, partly because of some changes to Facebook, and I've been giving you my 2-minute tips. But somebody shared an article with me this week from the New York Times that I really felt compelled to talk about, because I see it in my practice every day. But before I get to that, I always like to do a little bit of a rant, and today's rant is a very easy target. It's Wells Fargo again, and another report came out this week about some more misconduct by Wells Fargo, specifically denying 300 homeowners modifications and forcing them through the foreclosure process and throwing them out on the street because of an alleged computer glitch. And the problem is with these massive banks is that they have people that are not happy working there, that are not experienced, and really don't care about the person on the other end of the phone and how this will impact their lives, and go out of their way to try to help them stay in their home instead of just plugging in some numbers, looking at some cookie cutter stuff, and just making an unthinking decision as to no, you're denied. So another story came out against Wells Fargo this week about that, and you can find that online. Go to the Money Matters page, and I have a link to that particular article. It also has a link talking about how they had to pay $2.1 billion in penalties because of giving loans to people who should not have received loans. So again, another great story about Wells Fargo. But what I really want to talk to you today about is something that I see every day in my practice. And what that is seniors coming in to talk to me about bankruptcy. And I live in Charlotte County, which is one of the oldest counties. I think we were the first. We might be the second oldest median age county in the state of Florida, or I should say in the entire country. So I'm familiar with just having seniors come see me, but I didn't realize that it was such a nationwide problem. So there's an article this week in the New York Times talking about how the percentage of seniors filing for bankruptcy has tripled since 1991, and some of the reasons are really obvious, and I see it in my practice. Big thing is increased medical costs, which are more on the backs of the seniors, but the vanishing pensions. Again, our grandparents and maybe even our parents, I know my mother has a pension. Adding that onto her Social Security, she's able to get by. If she didn't have that pension, she'd be struggling. So because of this greater responsibility, this greater out-of-pocket expenses, and with people, not having that retirement put away, not having that 401k, we're seeing these earlier baby boomers who are caught in between and didn't plan. And what I see a lot of my practice is, let's say, a couple receiving 2 Social Security checks, and someone passes away. So they go from maybe $2,100 a month to $1,100 a month. That is a huge change in finances, and how they get by is by relying on credit cards to make up that difference. But eventually they max out all the cards, they have no place to go, lawsuits are being filed, maybe they can't pay their mortgage, and they face losing their house. As an aside, what I've been seeing all of a sudden this month is a number of foreclosure actions being filed on reverse mortgages, and they're being filed because someone hasn't paid the taxes or hasn't paid the insurance. Now, with a reverse mortgage, you don't have to make a mortgage payment, but what people may not realize is you still have to pay the taxes and insurance on that. And if you've run out of money, you don't have enough cash flow, and especially since the bills come once a year, you may not have that money. The lender might float you for a year or maybe 2 years. And in both cases I saw this year, or I should say this past month, the lender floated them for 2 years and then said enough is enough and filed the foreclosure action. So we're seeing a lot of that. But again, some of the statistics reported in this New York Times article, and again it was based upon a study that was conducted back in 1991, 1.2 individuals over the 65 out of 1,000 were filing. That's up to 3.6. But what's even more alarming is the overall percentage of filers. Back in 1991, only 2.1% of all filers were over the age of 65. Today, 12.2% of all filers are over the age of 65. And again, looking at the numbers for bankruptcy, it's just the tip of the iceberg. These are the people that have been pushed to the edge and can go no further. There's a lot more coming behind them who are struggling just getting by, maybe borrowing for their kids, getting subsidized by their kids or other relatives to help get by. You know, I also have so many people come to see me who, again, have this mortgage payment, and that's one of the other things that we'll talk about, but they can't make the payments. I say you need to get a roommate. Doesn't have to be a romantic roommate. Just get a roommate in to help you make the rental payment. Of course, when you're in your 70s or even 80s, the last thing you want is a roommate, but that may be the only way to maintain your independence and keep a roof over your head. You know, one of the reasons you see so many seniors, especially down here, working at the local supermarket, working in the fast food store, is they need that supplemental money to make ends meet. And I'm sure they never thought their golden years would be working at the Golden Arches. Another interesting statistic in this article is that 90% of the income that people over the age of 65 rely on for support is Social Security. 90% they're relying on that. So especially when one spouse dies, you can see how devastating it is when people haven't properly planned. You know, about 3 in 5 of the people who did have to file bankruptcy who were over the age of 65 said it was because of medical expenses. And here's a stat that, again, I've talked about before, about how all Americans really don't have an emergency fund, and I preach the need for this, but the bottom 25% of households over the age of 65 have an average of only $3,200 to fall back on in case of an emergency. So you see why that they have to rely on the credit cards. So again, part of the problem is also that, and this is a really interesting statistic, is the number of people over the age of 65 with mortgages. Again, if you bought a house when you were in your 30s or your 40s and it was 30 years, by the time you're 60 or 70, you should have your mortgage pay off and you get rid of your biggest expense. But in this statistic said back in 1989, about 21% of people over the age of 65 held a mortgage. Today, 41% of people over the age of 65 have a mortgage, and that is a huge expense when your income is going down. And that's what people, again, are not planning for. You know, if you work till you're 65 or work till you're 70, making about the same income, that's great. But once you go into retirement, you don't have that big pension, and you are relying on Social Security, and maybe you have a 401k, but you're draining that 401k, you only have $50,000 in a 401k, and you're draining that at $2,000 a month. After 2 years, that's gone. And that's the problem. People are not planning, and that's why you see people working. I see, there's nothing more heartbreaking than have somebody sitting across from you, 82 years old, complaining that nobody will hire them, and it's just the reality of it. They're frail, especially someone who used their hands their entire life, used their muscle. They're not getting a job at 82. It's just not going to happen unless they can maybe get a job at a supermarket. But if it's something that requires you to stand on your feet all day, they're not going to be able to do that. So I see that problem. And then this one, the one that really, really bothers the heck out of me, is because people over 65 are filing bankruptcy because they loaned money or gave their 401k or retirement to their children. They helped their children buy a house. They co-signed student loans for their kids. And now the kids aren't helping them. The kids are gone. And they took out a second mortgage to help the kids buy the first mortgage on the promise that the kids were going to pay the second mortgage. They stopped paying. And now my clients are getting foreclosed on their second mortgage because they can't afford their payments. So these are all mistakes that I see. Finally, a big problem is medication costs. If somebody due to some changes was paying $70 and all of a sudden that thing goes up to $200 or $300 a month, that puts them into the disaster zone. Just drains them off of what their retirement is. Or again, they're relying on the credit card. So again, what I see is the credit cards are the safety net that the pensions aren't there anymore, and once they get maxed out, once a spouse dies and the income is cut in half, they're a big problem. So this report, these statistics, just kind of prove what I've been seeing in my practice. So how do you avoid this? How do you avoid being one of these numbers? How do you avoid being 70 years old, having to file bankruptcy, having to have creditors harass you? Well, unfortunately, it starts earlier. It starts in your 30s, in your 40s, really, truly planning for what's going to happen when you're 70. The problem is, especially with how easy mortgages are to get, people are buying their dream home at 60 years old with a 30-year mortgage. That's ridiculous. Yeah, you'll qualify for the mortgage loan, but it doesn't make sense. Again, just because they're willing to give you money, I say this all the time, just because they're willing to loan you money doesn't mean you can afford it. So you really need to think about that. You need to plan. So again, number one, you got to get rid of your credit card debt. Get rid of that. Be reasonable with a car payment. Again, it shouldn't be more than 5%. Create that emergency plan. Create that retirement fund. Sit down with a financial advisor to look at what your future would be like. Every financial advisor has some fancy program on their computers, and they can give you a number. Is this the kind of lifestyle you want to live? Well, here's what you need to be at to do that. And it'll blow your mind when you see that if you want to maintain your current lifestyle, you need $2 million on the time of your retirement. Now, it's doable if you do the right things, but it's got to start in your 30s and 40s. I would say 50 is the cutoff, and even that's pushing it. So again, you don't want to be like this growing population of people over 65 who are having to file bankruptcy, who are facing foreclosure, who don't have enough money to just pay their bills and keep a roof over their head. Well, again, if you would like to see more of these videos, get more tips and tools, free resources, including my ultimate budget planning tool, just go to the Money Matters website. It's at markmartella.com, and you'll find all those free resources. Also, if you have a question you'd like me to talk about on the show or about the show, just shoot me an email. It's mark@markmartella.com. Very easy to get to. And we're always look for us here on Facebook, and you can shoot me a message on Messenger. Again, I'm Mark Martella for Money Matters, and remember, you have the power to choose to live a debt-free, stress-free life. Have a prosperous week.